Welcome to Don's Mons, the show where we help coaches of all skill levels improve. I'm Don, the clutchest man in Mons, and the coach with the longest win streak in league history. And today I'll be joined by Coach Tyler, who has the second longest win streak in league history. Tyler,
I'm also the only one with a perfect record in regular season.
But that was the first season when we were all bad, so I wouldn't really count that for pretty much anything.
What's changed?
So the format of this show is mostly going to be analyzing each of the matches from a given week and kind of looking at coach strengths and coach weaknesses, see what mistakes people made, in addition to seeing like what good plays that they made as well. So Tyler and I both have some notes. We'll be going through each matches one by one. So the first match we're going to look at this week is the first match that was played in the entire season. The Canalave City Churums, Coach John, versus the Pittsburgh Pukamuku, Coach Dave. One of the highest level matches that we'll see this week with a pretty close result. So Tyler, would you like to start off with some feedback about John's play for the game?
John, my guy. My global advice is just you gotta make better plays next time. Like sending in Clef on Mew turn 1, really bad idea because you caught a Genesis Supernova and you died. And I understand sending in the Chestnut on the Mew, which I guess was partially to read a Dark Pulse, but I know what Chestnut set that was. It was Chest W, and that, number one, doesn't really do anything to Mew, and I don't think it advanced your game state at all. And it just... I feel like you just overly committed to some risky plays and Dave punished you for it, and as a result you were set really far back early on.
Yeah, I think that John played the beginning of the game pretty poorly by sacking off effectively 2 of his Pokemon to the Mew. And I spoke with John shortly after the match too, and he knew that, if he hadn't, threw so many things away at the Mew, he would have done better. And I think they played some mock games afterwards to have more fun, and I think John was doing pretty well in those because he decided not to just throw away half his team at the beginning of the game. But even so, John was still in a position to win late game with Lop, so I think that's something worth noting, and I think that John will bounce back. But it looks like he won't be getting the perfect regular season that was long eluded. So. But how about the battle from Dave's perspective? What are some things that Dave did well, and what are some things that Dave needs to work on?
I think the Mewbring was good. I'm glad that Dave actually listened to Jacob's advice and brought the Genesis Supernova Mew over whatever horrendous heat he was planning on. I think Mew was definitely the wave because it had the coverage options to cover John's entire team with only 3 moves. Because all it needed was Psychic, and then he ran an Ice move for Glysaur, and we actually saw the Dark Pulse, which I presume was to hit Zong. And he could have coupled that. We didn't see the 4th move, I believe. But I bet that it was probably something like Nasty Plot, which really would have busted through John's team.
For sure.
And I definitely think just YOLOing with the Mew was the right play, because we saw it made John flounder, and it just put him in a horrible position for the rest of the match. And just overall solid. Preserved his win con really well with Kirin.
Yeah, I think that Dave kind of deserves this win. John may have thrown some stuff away at the beginning of the game, but I think that Dave just played pretty well overall, and maybe some things near the end of the game where even though he had his win con, he was kind of losing a little bit of differential because he wasn't playing around Lop very well. But I think that for the most part, Dave played really solidly and deserves to take a W against one of the best teams in the league. Dave out here proving that, even though he was seeded to make playoffs this season, something that he's never done before, he's proving that, I think we're gonna see Dave in the playoffs for the first time this season, and I don't think it's just gonna be because we have 18 playoffs instead of 6. I think that Dave will rank in the top 6 players this season. So the second match we'll be discussing this week is the Orlando Oricorios and their 1-0 win against Minior Problem, the finalists from last year. So this is a match I haven't really studied as much as the other ones, so I'm going to leave Tyler to take point for this. Tyler, what do you think about how the coaches played in this week?
As far as Ben is concerned, I think that in choosing the Pokemon that he chose, probably needs to assess his opponent's options in the team builder a little bit better. I really liked the Victini set, and I really liked the fake out on Sandrush Excadrill by bringing what I presume was a sturdy Gigalith and a Mold Breaker Exca, which was a really solid idea. But his team kind of got in a bad situation, 6-0'd by Mega Aerodactyl, which is one of Finn's frontrunners, and I think he probably could have made some better choices so that he had more reliable answers than chipping it and then killing it with Laylee's Ice Shard. But I also think that Ben played this match really, really well. I had my doubts after the draft about Ben's efficacy in the games with the team that he had, especially against teams with really strong ground type options like Finn. But he showed us that he can play very, very well, even in the face of Sheer Force Landorus Eye at Finn. And speaking of Finn...
Yeah, that's something I have to say. Like, Finn, you know, I know you pride yourself on not actually looking at stuff before you draft and just kind of going with the flow. And I think you somehow always end up with amazing teams. But this is where it catches up to you, bro. You end up with a Pokemon that you're not supposed to have. I also think that this battle should have been like re-simulated or something at this point, and that it should have gone more in Ben's favor. Something should have happened there, because I don't think he deserved to take the Amoonguss out like that. But yeah, it was kind of sketched the entire time. I think that was a pretty big mistake. Yeah, back to Tyler.
Yeah, I think Finn should have done a better job assessing his win con, which in this matchup I think was definitely Aerodactyl. He could have very quickly noted that Victini was not Choice Scarf, which means that Aerodactyl could KO it. And once the Gigalith came in and there was no sand, that meant that the only way Ben could kill Aerodactyl was if you let him chip it and then he revenge killed with priority, which you let him do by sending in Aerodactyl on Victini multiple times, which you just can't afford to do if that's your win condition, and you bring Sheer Force Landorus Eye, so you have to sack it.
One thing I do think that Finn did really well, though, I liked some of his prep, especially the safety goggles, Celesteela. I mean, it was kind of a meme, but at the same point, it actually really worked and helped his Celesteela become like a reliable check to the Amoonguss, which I think was pretty important and allowed him to have like a safe switch-in. He didn't really have very many safe switch-ins against like Victini and stuff like that, but at least like he had something that he could send out to avoid like worrying about being spored or anything like that. And I think he played it really well too. Finn utilized like Protect and stuff pretty well to scout out like Energy Ball and Victini. And I think that most coaches in the league don't really utilize Protect very well. And whenever I see them like trying to bring it, I'm like, you don't know how to do this. You should really not bring Protect if you don't know how to use it. But Finn knows his stuff, so I think he played that really well. But any other final thoughts about this particular match, or?
Not in particular.
Okay, well then we'll move on to the next one. The next matchup we have is the New Jersey Joltix versus the Neon Genesect Evangelion. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, anyway. Pace versus Angelo. I've got some stuff I wanted to talk about this match. So starting off with Pace's perspective of the match, I think that Pace played okay. I don't really think he had much of a situation to kind of prove himself in this match. I think he kind of just stuck to one game plan. Turn 1, Pace made a huge mistake by pain splitting. I'm not sure what he was trying to accomplish by doing that turn 1. If he had clicked Infestation there, which was a really good set bring, he was a really creative idea that he had, and he brought it, and he ended up executing it well. But he should have done it turn 1, because he kind of, by the time he actually got a chance to use it, it shouldn't really have worked. But thankfully for Pace, it actually did end up working. Outside of that, I mean, Pace played pretty well. He just kind of clicked moves and punished Angelo for getting greedy. And that's one thing I wanted to address with Angelo's gameplay. He had some interesting ideas, like running modest specs on Thundy was good, because he wasn't outspeeding anything anyway, and at the same time, modest specs allowed him to do a lot of damage and rack up damage against like Pace's Assault Vest Muck and stuff like that. So in theory, it was a pretty good bring. But Angelo kind of had his beginning of the game and his end of the game somewhat reversed. So he starts off like his first 3 Mons by going for setup. So the Gardevoir, the Aggron, and there's one other thing that were all like setup Pokemon that he sort of led with. The Sharpedo. But at the time he was doing that, he wasn't able to set up fast enough to actually do anything to Pace's defensive walls. So he got a little bit of chip, but then at the end of the game, he was left with like a Toxapex that wasn't going to be cleaning much up. The Thunderous, being spec'd into a move, wasn't able to break through everything. It had to kind of pick and choose its targets, especially because there's still the Volt Absorb Zero Aura left over to kind of snag those electric moves, prevent it from using its most powerful attacks. So I think that Angelo going forward needs to sort of reevaluate his overall like game plan by sort of scouting out his opponents first, utilizing things like the Regenerator Toxapex earlier on in the game, where it can come in and out and sort of recover its health and kind of rack up a little bit of chip or set up some spikes or something like that. And he should save the stuff like the Columbine Gardevoir for later on in the game, when, you know, getting that one Columbine up will mean a lot in terms of how much it'll be able to do to Pace's walls and stuff like that. I also think that he just needs to be a little bit less greedy with the boosts in general. Everybody who knows me knows that I'm sort of the boost aficionado in the league. Like, I legitimately run Shell Smash or whatever, Dragon Dance. That's sort of like my jam. So I respect Angelo for going for it, but I just think that he needs to reevaluate when he's doing it. Save it for the end of the game. Maybe he can become the new clutchest man in Mons if he kind of reworks his game plan a little bit. But that's kind of a surface glance at both of the teams. Does Tyler have anything deeper to add? Or
you pretty much said all I wanted to say. I think Angelo just also needs to do a little bit better job of assessing what he can do against an opponent's team. Like, I don't think when you're in with your Mega Aggron against a Weezing that setting up curses should be your game plan. Like, especially if you're not going to have Rest Talk Curse, because that would be the only set that I would really want to stay in on Weezing with.
yeah.
And just going for setup options turn 1 is just not a good idea.
Unless you have a Pokemon like a Cloyster or something like that. Not like with an Aggron. You're not trying to get slower and slowly just kind of weigh yourself down.
Steel in one too.
Yeah. Anyway, like Angelo, I think you definitely have some potential. Just kind of rework your game plan a little bit. Sort of like, you know. But like you're getting there. And Pace, don't get too cocky. You know, you're gonna lose next week. Mark my words.
Mark my words.
Yeah, you don't think I said that? Alright. On to the next match.
It's funny.
The next match we have is probably the most surprising of the week. One of the biggest upsets. The Ivory Town Infernape's going down 0-3 versus the Snorlaxatives by Coach Eric Dick Cox. So Dick last season was a, you know, middle of the line coach. He picked up Glumac's old team later on in the season and did pretty decently with the Rain team that he ended up building. But, you know, this team, he built a team that closely resembled Tyler's from last season. So it's well-rounded, and I was interested to see what he would do with it. And I was impressed through his first match. One of the things I wanted to note is running HP Dark on the Manectric was something that really caught me by surprise. I thought for sure he'd be running HP Ice because there was a Zygarde on the other team. But the decision to, you know, kind of evaluate things and kind of go, no, I think that the Alola is a more potent threat against my team or something I need to address more with my Manectric. So I'm going to run the HP Dark. I think that the HP Ground would have been better in every circumstance there, but I really like the idea of what he was doing. And there was a bunch of things that he was doing earlier on in the game as well that were kind of working in terms of doubling and stuff like that. And overall, like, once he got the T-Tar out there, I think he really deserved to get that W. But I know Tyler has some things to say about Dick's play as well.
Speaking of Tyranitar, my main thing about Dick's play, well, it did end up coming together in the end. He was just playing way too scared. He wasn't playing with the aggression that his team is capable of, and I think that led to him just racking up a bunch of unnecessary damage, giving Mark a lot of unnecessary free turns. Because, especially in the early game, like, he Stone Edges the Kamala, it takes over 50%. So he should be able to calc what that Kamala is, and he doesn't have to worry about choice, because as we see, he's Assault Vest. But he decides to switch out instead of just going for the kill when Stone Edge was a no-risk play. So he switches out, then he switches back in.
It's 20% risk play.
You wouldn't run a max defense, max speed Kamala. with superpower. But he switches out, and then he switches back in and goes for the Stone Edge anyway. And he does the same thing against the Greninja with his Tyranitar, and he was overall just, in my opinion, playing way too scared. He has the bulk to abuse, and he just wasn't abusing it. And if he was playing against a team that was more suited to counter his than Mark's, he would have gotten punished for that severely, and it could have resulted in him losing the game.
How about Mark's play then? I think Mark started off really well. Again, he was kind of dancing around a little bit, had some really good predictions and doubles and stuff like that he was making, and it seemed like typical Mark, and defending champion, the team to beat really. But then once he sort of got into his mid game, it seemed like he had no way to sort of handle things, especially the Tyranitar. He sacked half of his Pokemon to it. Like, I had to watch the battle a couple times to kind of figure out why he did that, and it just turns out he just didn't really prepare for the Tyranitar much at all, and didn't really have much of a game plan to fight against it. Something I know that he knows about, and something that he was kind of saying in the chat afterwards. But I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Like, it's the opponent's tier 1, you kind of have to take that into account, that it's on the team, and have plans to beat it. So I don't really agree with stuff like sending out the Greninja and toxic spiking. I guess Mark was predicting a swap or something there, but like there were situations where he just kind of let his kills rack up to the point where he just got beat by Scarflotti, which was a good bring on Dick's part, and I think Mark knew that it was going to be Scarf from the team preview, but even so, what's your take on Mark's play, especially the second half of the game?
I think with the team he had, he played it pretty well, but I still have the same issues with Mark's team that I stated in the draft recap, and he has made changes to address the same issues. But overall, I just don't think the team was well equipped to handle Tyranitar at all. That was really just his big downfall.
Yeah. But with some new changes and up against a free team in the Neon Genesect David Galleon, I think we'll be seeing Mark pick up the second one later this week. Quote me on that. So the next match we have is the Linden Lintons versus the Phantom Thieves. As Colin's sort of mentor in the league, I kind of have to take responsibility for the 6-0 here. Colin and I were talking, the day before the team. We were still kind of going over things like what are Colin's Pokemon, what do they do, what might Jeff bring, and stuff like that. And we never really reconvened to sort of actually do mock games or kind of like address how things might work out. So I had mentioned offhand to Colin oh yeah, Azumarill will live a Gyro Ball +1 from Stack Attacka, just run min speed, and Colin was expecting it to take a +1 Gyro Ball, and it didn't because he was running max speed. So there were things like that in Colin and my communication that sort of just broke down, that kind of led to things falling apart a bit. I also didn't really talk enough about Stack Attacka, and the potential to run a Shockberry or something like that. Didn't really come up much. So I think it was just Jeff is one of the best coaches in the league, knows his team pretty well, and Colin was just kind of very inexperienced, and I didn't really provide him with a proper background. But I think that, going forward in future weeks, I'm going to work with Colin a little bit more closely. I think that he's been playing some battles in the ladder with his team, trying to get a better feel for it. I think that's definitely helping him as well. So I think that Colin's going to bounce back. But I think Tyler also does have some things that he can kind of work on with Colin in particular to say about the team. So I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, well, I mean, this game kind of entirely centers around Stack Attacka. So my discussion is mainly focused around that. But Colin did mention to me that he messed up his calcs pertaining to the Stack Attacka, which, I mean, he is new. It is also a big yikes, but that's something he's got to work on. Another thing, he probably should have recognized that there is only one Stack Attacka set that gets attack boosts. And so he could have adjusted his play a little bit better around that and not sent in the Siglet, for example. And I think seeing the Stack Attacka, he floundered a little bit because he actually has quite a few removal options for the Stack Attacka that he didn't use. Like the Salamence didn't come out until it dies at the end of the game, but it had Earthquake, so it could have KO'd the stack attack, especially after
the Shaka was used in turn 1, so it was kind of...
He sacrificed the Electivire to get that Earthquake off.
Which I think was a very good play for turn 1. Just getting damage on that and potentially even taking it out if it didn't have Shaka. I think that was a pretty good play.
I definitely think that was the way to go.
Yeah.
He also had a Zoom rule that he could have sent in earlier. But, I mean, the game was pretty brief. I do think, though, outside of those specific things I mentioned, Colin actually demonstrated some good decision-making process, especially in the way he used his Porygon 2. And he recognized that if he was going to just keep recovering against a stack attacker, then he was just going to lose. So he actually went for hacks instead of damage with Tri-Attack, which is absolutely the way to go.
Yep.
I am definitely a proponent of always go for hacks. But, and also just how he uses Porygon 2 in general, I thought was pretty good. As far as Jeff is concerned, I mean, it's...
Jeff didn't really do very much. He kind of did the one thing.
Yeah, he sent in stack attack and he got his 6-0. Everybody gets 1. Jeff, you're going 1-9. Colin, you're going 9-1. Believe it.
All right, but I'm gonna be. It's gonna be interesting. I'm not having too much time to work with Colin this week, but especially for week 3, by that point, I think that Colin's going to be showing off. That's the goal. Colin to beat Dick in week 3.
So our 6th matchup this week is the New York Yveltals, coached by Antonio, versus the Bethlehem Bouchard, coached by Jacob. And this was actually a pretty close match. It was 1-0 in Jacob's favor. And the first thing I'm going to focus on is some things I think Antonio could have done a little bit better. Number 1, I think his Ditto utilization could have been a little bit better. I think he saw the boost that the Gastrodon got from Storm Drain and said, yes, Ditto. Which, to be fair, is usually the right way to go. But Gastrodon's a wall, so it's not really a good Ditto target.
Especially later in the game, Ditto could have been amazing against the Chandelure.
I agree.
The Ditto was changed back to a Choice Scarf set at the last moment, but for the longest time it was also a Focus Sash Ditto.
He could have stolen that Z Sunny Day boost and run through Jacob's team pretty well. I also think that Antonio, in his first game with Rain, to be fair, has somewhat fallen victim to the classic Rain trap of having just a lot of similar Pokemon, which has led to Jacob having the capability to run one coverage set and hit his whole team, which he did with the Thundy, and he also should have done with the Azelf. I don't agree with bringing Psychic over a better move like Thunderbolt, which was one of my problems with Jacob's team. And the other thing with Antonio was I think he floundered when he saw the Thundy get up the agility, and I think we see that with a lot of newer players, is they'll see a Pokemon get upset up and they'll be like, oh damn, I'm screwed, and they stop assessing how they can get the threat gone. And so Antonio sacked 3 of his Pokemon before sending in Kingdra to KO the Thundy.
I think he didn't really calc super well there, but I know he was calcing really well earlier in the match though. I think that's one thing that I will write down as a positive for Antonio, his calcs and his kind of balls of steel. In particular, the Pelipper against the Chandelure, he knew that it would live a Shadow Ball, or he took the chance that it would live a Shadow Ball. It worked out. He lived at 1%. So that was huge, of course. It ended up like turning around momentum for him big time, and even put him in the driver's seat for a little bit. So I think that Antonio made some really good plays there. At the very beginning of the game, too, Antonio was sort of reading Jacob's movements based off of the prep battles that we were doing. So he did some doubles at the beginning of the game that were like really top-notch. It was only sort of later in the game when the battle started to spiral out of control that he started to break down his like strategy a little bit. But I think at the very beginning of the game, he came in with a concrete game plan, and he was playing it well and reading his opponent really well, which is hard to do. So I think that as he continues to do prep battles against his opponents, he'll build these skills and he'll get even better. The only thing I would say that I would kind of talk about, in addition to the 4 sacrifices that Tyler mentioned, clicking Waterfall with Swampert, you know, he got the classic Storm Drain trap twice. The first time, I kind of understand it, maybe just going for it, maybe he would, you know, kind of trick his opponent. The second time, you know, kind of move around a little bit, kind of predict that that's going to come in. But I think for the most part, you know, against the team, I really respect Jacob as a coach, so losing 0-1 against them, you know, is not a bad loss at all, in my opinion. So I was pleasantly impressed by Antonio this week, and I think that in future weeks he'll do a lot better. But moving on to Jacob a little bit, I was watching the battle with Glumac, and there was one play in particular that Glumac was like completely disgusted by, and that was the Chandelure versus when the Pelipper came back in to set Rain. Glumac pointed out that the Chandelure was at +1 speed. It could have easily just hit Sunny Day again to get rid of the rain, and then Pelipper wouldn't have been able to kill with Skull, would have missed a Hurricane in the Sun, and then from there, Chandelure and Sun, it just continues to sweep, and he has to switch out to try to restall the rain later. So if he just continued with like Sunny Day there, you know, it would have been big. But, you know, at least he brought that Z Sunny Day set, because that was huge. And for a while there, it made it look like he was going to tear through Antonio's team. The only other thing I kind of want to mention as positives and negatives, the positive, of course, the Gastrodon was used very well as a pivot. The negatives, well, I can't really fault him. Antonio had like a really good sort of trap Tornadus to get the Dancing and just murder it with HP Steel. But I think that Jacob probably should have suspected something there. So I would have liked to see like a little bit more cognitive awareness there. But even so, I think that was more of a good play for Antonio than a bad one for Jacob.
Yeah. Jacob definitely just blew his load too early with the Z Sunny Day Shandy. I think it would have been a little bit more devastating if he waited to have a guaranteed kill on Pelipper before he went for the raw Z Sunny Day, and he could have just gone for regular ones before revealing the Z. And my other thing was that Agility Thunderous was a very, very smart bring against a Rain team. Especially with all the coverage you brought, Rain just had a very limited set of options to deal with it, especially once that Ditto got removed early on.
Yeah, so I think that Jacob might need to work on his differential a bit in future weeks. Not looking that great for playoffs if he's only squeaking out his games +1 or something like that. I can attest to the value of having good differential. But yeah, you know, interested to see where both teams go from this point on. The final match of the week, well, the final one we'll be discussing is this one that still hasn't happened yet, is Clampearl Harbor versus Philadelphia Union. Glumac versus Chris, a classic match from last season, I believe. So, game ultimately comes down to a Diggersby sweep that I wouldn't really say was amazingly done by Glumac. He set up, but it wasn't exactly the hardest thing to set up. I think it was more Chris making some misplays near the end of the game, and I think Tyler's going to address those in a little bit. But I want to talk about how Chris played the beginning of the game pretty well. The sucker punch against the, you know, the Latias was really good, and taking that out of the equation was huge for his team. I think he prepped for that pretty well. And I also agree with his decision to take down the Mega Bayonet as well, even if it did run the risk of like costing him his own Pokemon. Because I think that using the Hontra to take out 2 Pokemon that it does best against in the matchup is pretty huge, but you know, it did leave him without much of an option to cover the Diggersby, which is regrettable, but I think that should be the burden of other Pokemon, not necessarily the Honchkrow. So I think that the Honchkrow play from Chris was great. I think that everything else was kind of sketch. It's a shame that he missed the Stone Edge, but it was still going to turn out the same way as soon as the Diggersby came in. But yeah, Tyler, what do you have to say about Chris and Glumac by extension? Because there's really not much I have to talk about with Glumac. I know he's a good coach. He's not going to watch this for my feedback anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say about how Glumac played this out. I disagreed with stacking the Latias to the Honchkrow, but I understand the fear of pursuit, because that's pretty real. So it was definitely a 50-50 there. He just happened to lose. I know what that's like.
I don't.
But the Diggersby sweep, again, like it's not that impressive that it happened. Chris's team was sorely underprepped for Diggersby. As far as Chris is concerned, I disagree with not playing around the most telecasted Destiny Bond in the universe. I mean, if his Honchkrow had 4 attacks, he still could have gone for like Sucker or something, because we know he had Sucker Punch. So he probably could have done a better job, because why else would a Bennett come in on a Honchkrow at +1?
That's true.
But
I forgot about the Sucker potential.
I also disagree with him putting himself in a situation that gave Diggersby a free turn, which I assume his Garchomp was scarfed. or banded. It was probably Scarf.
It was not banded. It
Yeah.
22% to Diggersby.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Garchomp bandit will do like 50.
He put himself in a situation where Diggersby got a free turn, and that is not something you want to do with a team that doesn't respond well to Diggersby. Because as we saw, it just let Glumac click that wonderful Swords Dance button and just obliterate his team. Or it would have not done if Chris had run a fighting move on his Mega Gallade. But for some reason he didn't have that. So
yeah, I think that's a pretty big prep matter. Like, one of Glumac's biggest... I've kind of panned Glumac's team before for not, in my opinion, being the best. But, like, you have to respect certain Mons, and Diggersby is definitely one of them. So, that Chris didn't do that on a team where I don't think has that many threats is pretty huge in my opinion. I think he over-prepared for the Lottie, even though he ended up taking it out super early. And he didn't have much gas in his tank left after that. It was sort of, in my opinion, like the Mark match with him not really prepping too hard for T-Tar. Or for like the John match where, you know, he didn't really handle you well at all. It's stuff like that when you're not prepared for everything your opponent can offer, and you have like a pretty big gap against one of the opponent's main Pokemon. I don't think these are really necessarily like team preview issues. I think they're more team building and preparation issues that I hope these coaches can bounce back from in future weeks. But is that about all we have for this week, or?
Oh, are we going to discuss transactions?
We can touch on them. I didn't want to like be that the focus of the show, but yeah, by all means. Tyler, do you have a preview of some of the transactions from the week? Because I haven't really looked too deeply into very many of them. So you can just give a quick like minute for each one or something like that.
It'll probably take less. Before the start of the season, we had transactions from both Antonio and John. Antonio swapped out Tauros for Mawile.
For some reason. Please, Antonio, swap them back. Please, Antonio. Don't listen to Chris Thompson when it comes to transactions. Please, 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 please.
Yeah, that was a questionable decision. I was kind of hoping that you would take it back after he told me, but he didn't. So he's got the Mawile on his team. Mawile's not very good. For long.
We talked about this. So.
Tauros, on the other hand, is a good tier 5.
It's not a great tier 5 in my opinion, but it was serviceable.
It's got sheer force.
It was serviceable, and you know, for having the same exact abilities as the Mawile and higher base stat totals in every stat except for special attack by like 5 points, you know, really the only thing it has under Mawile is the typing.
John swapped out Dragalge for Tentacruel. I think that was a pretty good swap. John didn't really have a bulky water to rely on, and Tentacruel gives him that. Tentacruel also gives him another hazard removal option. And it's a pretty nice Pokemon for draft. Got a really good speed tier, really solid bulk, although it is really lacking physically. But it can, for example, live a Kyurem Black's Fusion Bolt if it's invested in defense. So it definitely has bulk that you have to respect. And I think it pairs very nicely with John's team, especially with Pokemon like Bronzong. Very nice low-tier defensive core.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was a big step up, especially to alleviate some of his ice weakness as well, because like it was pretty noticeable before he made that swap. Still free freeze dry week, but there's fewer freeze dry Pokemon than there are coverage ice mons.
Yeah. As far as for week 2, we had 4 people make transactions. The first 2 were the small ones, and those would be Chris and Jacob. Chris dropped Mr. Mime for Kadabra. Mr. Mime has a lot of cool utility options, but I think Kadabra, personally, is a much better tier 5 choice for a psychic type. Better speed tier, better power. You lose out on some good utility abilities, but pretty much all you could want, really, from an offensive Pokemon in tier 5.
I honestly don't really see too much of a change. It just makes him a bit more offensive, but I think Chris's team would have appreciated the utility a little bit more. But like overall, I don't think it's too big of a change. They're kind of still doing the same role, just to a different extent. So Kadabra a little bit less on the defensive or support side, whereas Mr. Mime was less attack oriented. So I don't know if that was a big deal transaction at all.
Just a cute little one. Jacob dropped Darmanitan and picked up Dragalge, which hurts my soul just a little bit. I mean, Darm get dropped.
Seriously, like, why did he have both Darm and Shandy? Like, why was that a draft pick?
Because he let Dave draft for him. But Dragalge, it fits a lot better on his team. I don't really think there's a lot to say there.
Yeah, no, I think for sure. I think that Darm is a good Pokemon in free agency. If somebody has like good spin support for it, it could be a good pickup. It hasn't made any sense for the teams I've been talking about maybe doing transactions for, but like, it's a good Pokemon. It's there. It's the league meme. You can't just let it chill there. And then we have the two big changes. I guess we'll start with Mark and then end up with you.
Yeah. So I've been working with Mark a little bit. Mark and I agreed basically on the holes in his team after draft, which is that his low tier just didn't do a lot for him. So he made changes to give himself a more viable set of low tiers. He's used Meltank before, so he's very familiar with that
Meltank's amazing in draft. I thought that was a great pickup.
Yeah, Meltank is a really strong tier 4 pick. Claydol's a really good tier 5. Got Rocks, Levitate, good defensive choices, decent move pool offensively for niche coverage options. Klefki's also a really strong pick in draft. Steel Fairy is really, really good typing, coupled with prankster choices that got swagger and foul play.
I think that Jacob kind of used Klefki just kind of all right the last 2 seasons. It wasn't his strong point for sure. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Mark, who I think is a much better coach, does with the Klefki. Because I think it's a Pokemon with a lot of utility, so I think that Mark will be able to bring out more of his options and do stuff that we haven't really seen so far.
And then he used his 40 remaining points that he didn't use in the draft to pick up Nidoking, which is actually a really, really strong pick for his team. Gives him a nice, powerful wall breaker to couple with his Koko and his Greninja, which are really solid pivots. And then he just throws in Greninja and obliterates offensive Pokemon that are slower or don't want to stay in because they can't kill, or even just walls, because Sheer Force LO is nothing to sneeze at.
And like even in helping pace team build for the next week, like Nidoking's been a huge problem. So I think it'll like see use like right out of the gate, which is pretty big for a free agent transaction like that. But moving on, we have one last one. So I'm not even going to say anything about it. I'm just going to let Tyler explain and try to justify what he did.
Try to justify? I gotta try to justify what I drafted, man. So I was actually originally in the draft going to pick 3 tier 1s. But I got scared because I didn't want my Mega to get sniped, so I didn't end up doing that. And I kept the same tier spread because I noticed a couple of good Pokemon that didn't get picked up. But I dropped Togekiss, Suicune, Mienshao, and Umbreon. Umbreon I was always going to drop. Suicune I was probably going to drop. Togekiss and Mienshao I tried to avoid dropping, but they have had to leave as a consequence of what came in. So I had a couple issues with my team, most notably that I was railroaded into certain coverage options. I didn't have a really strong wall breaker, so my team just kind of moved around and didn't really do anything with it. And I had good bulk options, but they weren't strong bulk options. And so my free agent transactions were made to address that. So I picked up Goodra, Buzzwole, Snorlax, and Slowbro. Goodra is one of the 6 Pokemon in this entire game that I'm most experienced with. This is a Pokemon I really like. It's got a crazy move pool. Like, that thing gets every coverage type in the book. It's got really solid special bulk, even uninvested, which means that you have a lot of flexibility with your investment in Goodra. And since I have webs, I actually don't need to worry that much about the relative lower speed tier. And that is also something that played into me getting Buzzwole, because I was stacking fire weaknesses at this point. 2 bug types, but bug is a really strong offensive type, especially in draft. And when I picked up Goodra and then 2 other fire resists in tier 3, being Slowbro and Snorlax, I could justify getting Buzzwole really well. Buzzwole's just really strong.
But I want to pause right here. Snorlax isn't a fire resist.
It is thick that.
No. It should always run the same set with Gluttony and Belly Drum.
Get out of here.
It's never run anything else in the history of our league, and it should never run anything else ever again. So yeah. You picked up 1 fire resist. Go on.
Buzzwole's got... I used it a lot when I was helping Chris prep last season, and I really like its options, especially when coupled with sticky webs. It's just got a lot of really good physical bulk, which is something that I didn't want to have to wholly rely on my Lando and Jirachi for. And just a really nice offensive move pool. It's a shame it doesn't get close combat, but I'll live. Snorlax was the last Pokemon I decided to pick up. Just fire and ice resist if I need it. Otherwise I can run a bunch of other jank sets. Just like Goodra, a bunch of just really wide move pool, lots of options. It's also got really good uninvested special bulk, just like Goodra. So I've ended up kind of gearing my team more towards like a webs bulky offense, which is sort of what I wanted in my team concept, and I didn't end up drafting that very well. And my final one is Slowbro. I was losing Mienshao and Suicune, so I wanted to pick up a Regenerator Mon and a Water type. Haha, look at that. So I have Slowbro, and that actually cores really well with Tangela. I've got a nice regen core there. Kind of a poor man's Tangrowth Slowbro. But,
Okay, Face.
Slowbro is a really good choice in draft. I mean, it's fallen from its OU grace recently, but got setup options, just really solid physical bulk. Thunderwave, good move. Can spread status if needed. And it's also got, you know, offensive stats that are nothing to scoff at. So if I want to be, if I'm feeling wild, I'll run Band Slowbro. I'll run Belly Drum Slowbro.
It's the god set.
Yeah.
I now that Slowbro, like regular, is finally in one of our battles for both, or one of our like teams for the league. I don't think we've had that before, have we? Regular Slowbro? I know we have Mega Bow seasons.
No, I don't think regular Slowbro's ever gone drafted, and I think Snorlax was always used by Annie.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to bring out the possibility. Tyler, please take one of the coaches in the league that isn't very good and loop them into an endless battle.
No, no, no.
It has to be the championships, please. Tyler, please do it.
The championships?
Yes.
Endless battle? Alright, now the real question is, would I be considered the winner if I caused the endless battle? Because that would mean that I had the opposing coach at my mercy.
We'd have to put it up to a poll or something like that. Yeah. But anyway, I think that about wraps up the transactions. Any final notes for the week? Or I think that's pretty much all I had for the week.
Yeah, can't wait to lose to Zach. Gonna get swept by a +1 Volcarona in T-minus
Battle's
45
happening,
minutes.
yeah, pretty soon. But overall, all the other matches for the week are finished. So, Tyler, thanks for joining me this week. It was a pleasure to have you. I'm glad that the first guest for John's Mons was as well prepared as you were, because I wasn't the most prepared this particular week. So hopefully when Pace or Dave, I think, are probably going to be joining me next week, one of the two of them. So hopefully they'll be just as prepared. But yeah, thanks again for joining us. And this was Don's Mons, presented by the clutchest man in Mons, Don himself.
Yikes.